You are listening to 95.7 FM WELT, Fort Wayne, Radioactive. The opinions and views expressed in this show are those of the hosts and guests only. They do not represent those of FreeThought Fort Wayne, WELT, or any other organization. Welcome to the Hoosier Humanist Hour, where we explore science, religion, culture, ethics, and community from the humanist perspective. Join us as we discuss those topics and more, free from the ideologies of religion and superstition.
For millions of years, mankind lived just like the animals. Then something happened, which unleashed the power of our imagination. We learned to talk and we learned to listen. Speech has allowed the communication of ideas, enabled human beings to work together to build the impossible. Mankind's greatest achievements have come about by talking, and the greatest failures by not talking. It doesn't have to be like this. Our greatest hopes could become a reality in the future. With the technology at our disposal, the possibilities are unbound. All we need to do is make sure we keep on talking. On March 14, 2018, mankind was left with much more than just the living memory of one of the most ingenious physicists to have ever wheeled across the earth. Stephen Hawking's impact and legacy will survive humanity itself. A pioneer in theoretical physics, Dr. Hawking's insights have forever improved our understanding of the universe itself, and perhaps, just maybe, even the very creation of the thing. So far as the world will ever know, his thirst for knowledge was unquenchable. And I quote, "My goal is simple. It is a complete understanding of the universe, why it is, and why it exists at all." Stephen Hawking is a prime example of what it looks like to dominate the game of life, having been dealt one of the crappiest hands possible. Hawking had a rare form of motor neuron disease, also known as ALS and Lou Gehrig's disease, that gradually paralyzed him over the decades. However, in an interview with New York Times Magazine on December 12, 2004, titled "The Science of Second Guessing," Hawking is quoted as saying, "My expectations were reduced to zero when I was 21. Everything since then has been a bonus." He was expected to only have survived for 2 years after his diagnosis. He ended up surviving 55 plus. Now, I'm willing to bet that the vast majority of us have had our minds blown and our lives altered in some way by this man. Although Stephen Hawking's passing might not be the topic for today, I honestly just don't think I could live with myself if I didn't at least mention his passing. That said, our topic today isn't too far removed. Today on Hoosier Humanist Hour, we're going to be discussing space exploration. I hope to cover as many topics as we can in this hour, and joining me for this discussion today, we have V, Chris, and our technical advisor, Andrew. Now, Chris seems to be running late, so hopefully he'll join us eventually, but if not, we'll soldier on. On the topic of space exploration, I thought it'd be fun to discuss various space missions that might be coming up, various projects that are even conceived of, for example, going to other stars and things of this nature. And I think a good place to start would be Mars. Mars is fun. Mars has captivated mankind forever. We used to worship the thing, okay? We, as a species, have this urge to go forth and explore, to seek out new life and new civilizations. And I am one of those people. I think it's amazing that we're able to even get there in the first place. It is almost unfathomably far away. And yet we, primates on this little rock here, floating off forever into space, into the distance, have somehow figured out a way to traverse that distance and not only get there, but to get information back. And that is incredible in and of itself. In fact, we're now getting to a point where it's feasible to think of ways to inhabit the planet. Some even want to suggest that we ought to terraform the planet in order to make it more Earth-like. Now, there's a lot of controversy in that, and we may or may not get to that. But on the topic of Mars, here very soon, NASA will be launching a new project known as InSight, InSight is a probe being sent to Mars in an attempt to learn more about how the red planet was formed, and also to learn about its various different layers. Really, we're going there because there's a big mystery as to how the different layers of the planets get to where they inevitably go, like where they are. Like we don't truly understand planet formation to that extent. We don't quite know, as the planet cooled, how the different layers ended up getting to where they are, why they are in the exact space that they are, so forth. These sort of details. And InSight is a probe specifically sent to gather data and insight into this. This could potentially help us learn more about planet formation, but also specifically about the planet itself, which that data, if we do want to terraform the planet, could be vital. This particular probe is equipped with 3 different tools to help measure various things from temperature to pressures, things of this nature. One of the things that separates this probe from any other Mars probe is the fact that one of its main probes is a 5-meter long drill, which is the longest and deepest tunnel, or excuse me, deepest hole that we'll have ever made on another body, aside from, well, actually, but I do know that it's
that is actually true. I mean, like even when people are on Mars, they wouldn't have dug 5 meters deep. I mean, 5 meters deep is like 15 feet. There
Yeah.
is no way they dug 15 feet down. Um, so yeah, that if they actually, I haven't heard of this actually, and if they truly want to dig 5 meters deep, that's
Yeah.
impressive.
Well, it's more or less it's kind of like how they drilled through the asteroid in Armageddon, right? It's like the drilling for oil technique.
Yeah, you know
It's
that wouldn't work in reality, right?
Yeah. In fact, I think it was what was his what's his name? What's his name? A universe from nothing. Kraus.
Oh,
Kraus.
yeah.
Uh, um, I think it was him. He said that people that go through some sort of orientation in NASA when he's doing it, an orientation or whatever, he'll have people watch this movie and write down everything wrong with the movie in terms of physics. And it ends up being this huge list. I think he says like 180 some odd points that they utterly failed on things that are
So
just outright
basically,
impossible.
on a movie that's 90 minutes, they have 180 issues there. So every 30 seconds, there's something that's totally wrong.
Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah. So that it's just gonna be like a little half-dollar sized hole that goes down about 15 feet or so, like you'd mentioned. And another thing that they're looking for in particular is, well, it's not another thing. It's the way that they're trying to figure this out. Um, what they're specifically looking for is heat flow with this drill. And if you can picture like waves on sand, and that wave being the flow of heat, we can't know that without investigating, like probing it. So what this information tells us is how easily the heat transfers from one area to another, which can tell you a lot about the material that it's in and so forth. So this is the sort of data that they want to use to help figure out and learn more about.
Hello.
Welcome, Chris. We were just talking about Mars mission InSight. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not. Would you care to give me some insight?
I would love to, citizen. Let's see
Excellent.
here. Well, basically, the mission is a probe attempting to learn more about planet formation. Obviously, in this case, specifically pertaining to Mars's planet formation. We were just discussing all sorts of possible applications and the usefulness of such a mission. Really just getting there in the first place, just every opportunity we have to go there, in my opinion, is worth it. I think practice makes perfect, and the only way you're going to be able to improve is to keep on keeping on. Like, you got to keep trying.
Yeah, try telling my wife that. Good luck with that one.
She doesn't believe in NASA?
No, she doesn't believe in practicing something until you become better at it. She believes that you should be expert the first time, so she just berated me for tonight, which was fun.
So you're either a virtuoso or you don't touch it.
Hmm.
All right. Well, Anyway, on this subject, I know that we've discussed terraforming in the past, and I've been listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson a lot today. I honestly was hoping he would give me something to think about that I could bring up during this conversation. And he brought up a good point, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, but Chris agrees with this, but I don't know to what degree. But anyway, Neil deGrasse Tyson is actually of the opinion that it's kind of stupid to, well, I shouldn't say that, that it's probably not in our best interest to terraform Mars. He says, and his reasoning on this is genius in my opinion, but the way that he puts it is that if we have the capacity to make Mars more Earth-like, then we should be able to much more easily make a damaged Earth much more Earth-like. In other words, it'd be a huge waste of resources and time to try and make a whole other planet that is habitable for us than to just improve the conditions on our planet. Same logic would apply to something like it'd probably be a hell of a lot easier to deflect or destroy an incoming asteroid than to pick up and move 1 billion people to another planet. And
that's never going to happen. You can't just move 1 billion people to another planet. The sheer amount of fuel that's required just does not exist for anything like that. Like the amount of energy to achieve orbit, to take you there, to slow you down without killing you on the planet, it's not going to happen. We can send like little, a few people here and there. We may be able to build a colony of like, in my wildest dreams, like 1,000 people, but anything beyond that is just absolutely insane.
Come on, you got to be developing that transporter technology. We need more development along those lines. It's just not going to be practical to fight against gravity and leave this planet. We have to start up a colony, just finance one transporter over there, and then we can just transport everyone over. It'll be fun.
No, screw that. You guys are making this way too complicated. What you guys need is wormhole technology.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to have this whole moral, ethical conversation about whether or not that's really you on the other side.
I hear that they've found a wormhole on Earth.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Was it an apple?
No. It was actually a particular president's brain that seems to be a wormhole to nowhere. I don't even know where that goes.
One thing that people don't discuss about all these wormholes or transporter technologies is, okay, so imagine this. Like, you're in a lab somewhere where they're gonna demolecularize you and like transport you to another spot. Okay, well now think about how fast our planet is actually moving, and think about it relative to like the center of the galaxy. So we're circling the galaxy, we're circling around the sun, we're spinning at the same time. So unless that transporter can put you in the right place where you want to be and give you the right amount of speed to begin with in the right direction, you're going to be squashed like a bug. Because, even like a 30-mile-an-hour collision would kill you.
See, I've often wondered the same thing about like time travel too. Like, even if you just went back in time 1 second, the amount of actual space relative to, say, the center of the universe that the Earth moves, or excuse me, the center of the galaxy, not the universe.
Yeah.
That the Earth moves in that 1 second is pretty significant.
Oh, it's huge.
So, like, you would have to somehow factor all of that information into, because if you just decided to do what they did in the Time Machine movie, he just essentially was surrounded by a dome of temporalness stuff. I don't know.
Right. Yeah,
but like, I don't see how that would imply that he would therefore move with everything around. Like, it's actually apparent that nothing does. Like, he's somehow almost ethereal in this state. And so that's kind of what goes on in my mind. Another one of the reasons why I don't necessarily think we're ever going to figure out this time travel thing. However, speaking of, Michio Kaku explained that to me in such a way that I could understand it, how time travel might actually be possible in theory if we had material that had essentially anti-gravitational properties. Because the one thing that really stops you from going back in time is the event horizon, like this whole situation, because the density of a black hole is unstable. Like everything in there is unstable. So in order to make the event horizon stable, you need anti-gravity, and in other words, so therefore it's in theory at least possible. And what makes it even more interesting is the fact that I take it back. I don't think it's anti-gravity. It's anti-something. It's anti-energy of some sort.
It's negative energy. It's negative
energy. That's what it is. Thank you.
Well, here's the thing, though. So I wouldn't even go as much as saying it's theoretically possible. It's mathematically possible. Putting negative signs in equations is very easy. Putting a negative sign, like actually physically reversing a quantity of energy or something like that, it may not be possible. So you could write all the formulas you want. You can, swap signs and think, oh, well, what if this was a negative sign? What would happen? Yeah, you'll go back in time, but can that actually happen? I mean, probably not. It's very common when you're solving some mathematical equation, you're trying to figure out the position of something, and you'll get like negative positions and stuff, and you realize, well, that's just a bogus solution. It's just the mathematics ends up that way, and in reality, you can't have that. So,
no, I think that honestly, this whole inexplicability of the applicability of mathematics dilemma, I don't think that this is a real thing, like a real problem. I mean, to say, it's mathematics is a contrivance that we made up in order to help us understand the universe around us. So, of course, it's going to apply to the universe around us. Now, I've explained in the past how mathematics in and of itself, if just because a mathematical equation is valid, doesn't mean that it actually applies in the real world. And I've discussed this in the past with like the Banach-Tarski paradox, where you can take a sphere object, perfect sphere, I want to emphasize perfect sphere, simply rearrange its parts in such a way that you end up having two identical spheres without gaining or losing any mass in the original. And you have two identical copies. Now, mathematically, this is possible, but in reality, it's not. So, again, this is just one of those things where, when you look at mathematics, you're like, wow, how does it apply to the real world? So, well, mathematics does a whole lot of things, but it's just something that we made up.
You got to actually let the real world tell you if that mathematics applies, right?
Yeah.
Right, anyway, and that's where let's keep talking about space programs.
Yeah, so along the lines of space programs, let's see, what else do we have here on my notes. What was another fun one? Oh, speaking of, I actually don't want to forget to talk about this. The great overlord of the Twitterverse, Donald Trump, has announced his desire to see the advent of a new branch of the military. Oh, he wants to get it. He wants to call it. Get this, the Space Force.
The Space Force. My goodness.
Yeah, he's legitimately humoring the idea of creating a branch of the military specifically for space combat.
I mean, are we gonna arm the space shuttle and are we gonna dogfight with the Russian?
You'll have to ask Mr. President, because
craft or whatever.
This is the kind of crap that he pulls. He says, "Hey, here's some cuckoo idea that I have. Feast on this for a while, and then nothing will come of it." The wall. You know what I'm saying? Like, this stuff never happens, but he just stirring the freaking pot. It's disgusting. I mean, who says some stupid crap like this? On record in front of millions of people.
Yeah, that's just
ridiculous.
I mean, technically, intercontinental ballistic missiles can go into space, and they might do that on a regular basis, when they're traveling between continents and all that, but that still doesn't make it a whatever force that,
I mean, don't get me wrong. The only, as far as I'm aware, we have just one treaty banning nuclear weapons, but not necessarily banning the militarization of it, of space, that is to say. Now, I do know that there are more specifics involved, such as there are other accords where we can't claim any lunar territory as our own or anybody else's. Same with any other body. And this is one of the issues that we're going to run into when we start mining asteroids, as a matter of fact. because we have to come up with a way to we have to collectively agree on how we're going to handle materials that we gather from outer space. Now, I don't think that this is overly complicated. I mean, if you get it, if you find it, you get it, it's yours. I don't think it's that difficult. But because of the nature of democracy, excuse me, and politics, and excuse me, and bureaucracy, these things tend to get pretty convoluted pretty quickly. And so, of course, these things are problems. But in the grand scheme of things, these are things that. Go ahead.
Catching up to a comet or an asteroid to mine it is extremely difficult. I mean, not too long ago, there was the Rosetta craft and the Philae lander that landed on a comet. It had a two scientist name. It kind of looked like a bone, with two big things on the end, like a skinny neck in the middle there, and actually landed on the comet. I was only partially successful. The lander had three legs. Only one of the legs was able to latch on there, and kind of fell in a shadow. So we, had to wait for this thing to go around the sun to catch some light and do some exploration. But NASA did, in fact, land on a comet, and by the time we start mining these things, it's going to be many, many decades. We just don't have the technology to start doing that.
I think that many decades is a bit pessimistic. I honestly think that it'd be possible if we were driven to try. I think it'd be possible to mine a nearby asteroid within the next 10 years, really. I mean, we already know how to do it.
Well,
I mean, we
it's
just
not
have to be
a problem
determined to do
of
it.
mining. It's a problem of how do you get there with a big enough craft to collect enough stuff and be able to bring all that stuff back. Because when you think about it, that asteroid or comet is flying away from you. Okay, so let's say you're able to catch up with it, then you gotta turn around and accelerate in reverse, and with while you're weighted down with thousands and thousands of pounds of whatever you're mining, and so that requires a hell of a lot of fuel to be able to do, and it would just require some new type of propulsion that we just don't have, and it's not likely to come out anytime soon.
I think one of the main points that people were trying to really stress on was making a moon base. That way we could at least create some materials that are on the moon. That way we don't have to, get rid of those materials from Earth and propel them into space. We can just do it from the moon, which has a much less escape velocity required in order to leave the moon and the Earth's orbit, such that you can actually achieve space travel efficiently.
Right. So it takes decades to build that, takes decades to build the next technology. I mean, we're nowhere near mining any asteroid or comet yet.
No.
All right, fair enough. How far do you think we are from? Okay, here's my prediction. I'm going to put it this way. I predict that within my lifetime, before I pass away, I will get to have the pleasure of looking at pictures, actual photos of some sort that accurately depict an exoplanet. I really think so.
Yeah.
I really think that we'll be able to have relatively, in my lifetime, a relatively high quality photo. Something like how we used to be able to see Pluto before that what was it, Juno, or what was it that they sent? I can't remember what the Pluto one was. But before that, I think we'll have something along those lines. Kind of
I mean,
fuzzy.
a grainy, grayish picture, the way we were able to previously take pictures of Pluto and some of the other objects before we flew by them with the various missions that NASA's launched in the last few years. That's actually possible. That is actually possible. I mean, one of the missions that I had prepared to talk about was the Kepler telescope and the James Webb telescope, right? So Kepler is just about, on its last leg. It only has a couple more months left of fuel, and it's just going to die after that. And James Webb Space Telescope is about to launch, hopefully here in the next year. I believe that they want to launch it. So I think James Webb Space Telescope is probably our best bet to see any kind of even a like a little dot next to another star or something like that. You know that's coming out. That's on the books at NASA.
I am stoked about the James Webb Telescope. I've been thrilled by what we've gotten from the Hubble over the years. And I think the James Webb's was supposed to be 4 or 5 times the quality of Hubble, which is incredible.
Many times, because the mirror alone that James Webb carries has like almost 10 times the surface area of what Hubble has.
You know, I'm actually really, I know this is dumb and this is fanboy to the max. I cannot wait for Pillars of Creation 2.0. I want to see that. I'm hoping that they actually point it there and get some crazy detail that they weren't able to see before. Because I'm actually a big fan of the Pillars of Creation. I think that it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life.
The James Webb Space Telescope may not be able to see the Pillars of Creation. Here's why.
Oh, no.
No.
Really?
Well, I can't confirm that. I don't know for a fact, because the James Webb Space Telescope is designed to look in infrared light, which infrared light penetrates through clouds of dust and all those kind of things, which I think the Pillars of Creation are just basically giant clouds of material, dust, whatever, that's just in interstellar space. And I mean, that was the whole point of the James Webb Space Telescope, to see through.
A little bit bummed, but it is what it is.
Hold on. So it only sees in infrared?
Yes, only infrared.
Only infrared. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Specifically,
that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, see, I thought it was just. That was like a Hubble 2.0.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no. Hubble was specifically designed to be in the visible range, and I think part of that was a little more political. It was much easier to convince people to open up the purse strings and give you money when they know that the pictures that you see with it, you can directly see with your own eyes, because it's in the visual range, where this has to be processed and all that. I mean, the idea of the James Webb Space Telescope is to see one of its main missions is to see the forming of the first stars in the universe, which may have happened like about 200 to 300 million years after the Big Bang. And it's also supposed to look for, just like the Kepler telescope, for exoplanets, and try to study, if there could be life on other planets and things like that. But its primary mission is to see the first light after the Big Bang. So the very, very first stars that could have been as big as 300 times the size of the sun, and like millions of times brighter than the sun.
So what you're telling me is that really, to be able to see the Pillars of Creation in the light spectrum, I have to wait for the Samsung Galaxy S20 cell phone to come out in order to be able to take pictures of it. Is that what you're telling me right now?
That's what I'm saying.
Right. I just pre-ordered the S9 Plus, to be fair. So full disclosure, yeah, I'm a tool. What happens?
I don't think
one of the interesting things about the James Webb that's also very different from Hubble. Hubble orbits Earth. James Webb is going to be like millions of miles away from Earth. So, because basically any warm bodies anywhere nearby can pollute the picture sufficiently. So, it's got all kinds of various shields underneath. I mean, it looks like a big like satellite dish, but it's made out of hexagons, and it's all kind of gold-plated hexagon. I mean, they're beryllium, but it's yellowish like gold, just for people's imagination. And any little bits of unwanted light will affect the picture. So it's got shields. It's got to be far away from things. So it's going to be a few million miles away from Earth.
Call me optimistic. Call me what you will. I'm extremely hopeful. Call me wishful, if you like, that these first generation stars are going to surprise us. I don't think they're going to be just these standard helium I think at least some of them. Let me put it that way. I think that we'll end up coming across a couple of these first-gen stars that really shock us. What? Maybe one that's not entirely helium. You know what I mean? Like, so, well, not as much as they expect anyway.
Well, you mean hydrogen, right? Not
hydrogen.
helium.
Thank you for correcting me on a lot tonight, because apparently this is not my area of expertise. Just
well,
so you know,
helium would indicate that it's near the end of its life. So yeah, hydrogen is probably what you're aiming for.
Yeah. So initially, once the Big Bang happened, most of what formed was hydrogen. I mean, some helium formed, some other elements formed, but it was mainly hydrogen. And with the size that these stars were and the brightness, they only lasted a few million years, where stars today last for billions of years. Um, and one of the interesting things that scientists want to observe is, because their light, um, the ultraviolet light was so bright, these stars actually re-ionized the hydrogen around them. So basically, when you have a proton and an electron orbiting around each other, it's basically a hydrogen atom, and it's electron neutral. But the ultraviolet light was so bright, it was able to tear apart the proton from the electron and re-ionize the gas. And so that has its own specific light that is emitted when that happens, or absorbed. And so you won't see all those interesting signatures. So I'm absolutely certain that we're going to be blown away by what we see.
I'm pretty confident.
That's quite a pun, by the way. Quite blown away. You're right about that.
Well, see, I had a question a second ago. Sorry, I lost it.
Well, keep thinking. I'm gonna just mention something else that's very interesting. So for those that, um, are interested in space and all that, NASA has great resources on the James Webb Space Telescope. They have pictures, all that. I mean, this thing is made up of 18 hexagon-shaped mirrors that are like 4.3 feet across, and they just kind of fold like origami in order to fit in the rocket. So then they're going to launch it, and the origami is slowly but surely going to unfold. And in the middle, there's an opening there, and there's a circular mirror actually, and that's called the secondary mirror. And then there's a third mirror, and then the light goes to the detector. So it kind of bounces around a few times in order to concentrate it and send it to the detector. And one of the other very cool things is, in order for the scientists to be able to focus properly, they have a bunch of actuators. They can slightly move the mirrors a little bit, all those 18 big hexagons, and they can also adjust the secondary mirror that I mentioned that is round. They can actually change the curvature of that to adjust the focus depth and those kind of things. Um, which none of that was even remotely possible on the Hubble, because the Hubble has a um, glass mirror, and glass just wasn't. You couldn't make it big enough. You could never be lifted on the rocket because it would be just too heavy. Where beryllium, you can make it thin and light, and you can change its shape so that if you by accident have something not quite right, you can still adjust for it and account for whatever you didn't account for during your design. So I thought that was pretty awesome. That it folds like an origami, it unfolds, and then it's adjustable with various actuators and things like that. I mean, it's absolutely mind blowing. They can do that.
Yeah, I have no doubt that the James Webb Telescope is going to change the world, at least in some fashion. I think that like I said, I'm really optimistic that we're going to discover something that we weren't expecting to discover.
Yeah,
which
and
I think
as
goes without saying, but
right, and one thing that I also want to mention for it is that it's also going to look at exoplanets, and they're going to try to look at the light that comes from these exoplanets and see if they can determine whether there was any water vapor or methane or ammonia, carbon dioxide, monoxide, all those type of gases that are associated with life. and that maybe tells them that if there's life on those planets.
I hear that. Speaking of, I'll have to see if I can find this real quick. But one of, God, I think it was one of Saturn's moons recently has been shown to have higher levels of methane than expected coming out of its water jets, water vents.
Yeah.
And now that's not immediately proof that there's life on the planet, but the higher levels of methane than expected generally come from life forms of some sort. Life forms produce methane as they decompose, generally, at least here on Earth. So, but there are other ways to potentially create that methane naturally through other means, but it's highly indicative. So I'm kind of thinking it's possible there's at least bacterial life under there. I mean, I would honestly say, I will honestly say that I do not think I would be shocked. Surprised, yes. I do not think I would be shocked anymore if we found out that there was life on that moon. I think it was Europa.
I mean, we know that bacteria can survive on the outside of spacecraft that we have launched previously. Scientists have uncovered that minor contaminants, they had some bacteria on various surfaces, even survived the re-entry. So it's, there's some hardy bugs out there. And when you think about it, various asteroid collisions and comet collisions, all those kind of things, they can shoot rocks from Earth. They can land on other places, contaminating those with life. I mean, we've discovered rocks on Earth that have come from Mars. So, I mean, there's a lot of luck for that rock to fly just at the right trajectory at just the right time and, to fall on Earth. But we know that it happens. So, there's ways for life to spread, basically. And then life is pretty hardy, especially single cell type organisms. Single cell organisms can survive some pretty harsh environments and adapt. As long as they have just a little bit of energy,
Yeah, I mean, panspermia, I think it's called. I mean, who knows? Maybe we came from, and I found the name, and I'm probably very likely going to mess this up. Enceladus?
Enceladus, yeah.
Okay. It's Enceladus. It's one of Saturn's moons. Who knows? Maybe our life came from some Enceladus spout that ended up making its way here. I doubt it.
Yeah.
I'm just pooping.
No, it's not impossible. It's not impossible. I mean, you need just a little bit of energy in the form of heat or light, and life can start. Just if there's a chemical process that allows for that energy to be extracted, and that's not incompatible with a self-replicating, little cell of some kind, hey, you've got the building blocks right there.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there's some liquid water, or liquid at the very least, on this planet, and from what I can tell, from what I can gather, it seems as though the conditions in there, like you had mentioned, might be suitable for extremophiles. So yeah, like I said, I don't think I'd be surprised or shocked anymore. Maybe a little surprised. I mean, I don't think anyone could hear that we've officially discovered life outside of Earth and not be surprised. But I mean,
until a person lands there and like digs it up and sees it with their own eyes. And but see, the thing about that though is, suppose we did send somebody to Enceladus, and suppose they landed there, suppose they drilled and let's say they found life. Would you let that person back on Earth, considering that they may bring a bug with them that we don't know what's going to happen to us? Like that bug could infect us, or it could.
I think it's worth studying. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't know, if the person's contaminated to the extreme, perhaps not. I always think it's worth trying to save a person regardless of the situation. I mean, I don't know.
Sure.
But anyway, I do think that it would be worth the risk of bringing a sample back. I personally think so.
Well, they thought the same thing in the Alien movies. And to that, I say, screw that noise. Leave that sucker to die on that planet. He will have that baby himself, and that baby will die too.
Is that your serious sentiment, though? You want to leave it there? Don't touch it. Don't bring it back. Only look at what you can see.
I'm sorry. We're working on the level of War of the Worlds here, so we can have one thing crop up on this planet that wipes out every bit of population of humans that we have. It's dangerous to think.
I agree. It's dangerous, but I don't know.
Robotic probes are our best bet at this time.
Right.
Yes.
Or we need some insanely complicated protocols to make sure that we don't contaminate anything.
Oh, and to be fair, I feel like I need to clarify this point. I wouldn't be shocked if we found like bacteria per se. I mean, maybe a little bit surprised if we found bacteria, but I wouldn't be shocked to find very basic types of life form there. But if we found a little fish floating around, like even just one that eats a whole bunch of microorganisms, that would be shocking to me. I don't know. I have a hard time conceptualizing that type of life so close to Earth. I mean, maybe I'm biased. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's indoctrination. I mean, they basically told me, everybody, my entire life, that this is it, and life out there is just too harsh. And it's obvious. It's apparent. We haven't found it yet, and we've been looking.
Well, but don't you know it? The universe is fine-tuned for life.
Yes, for us, what a lot of one fish
argue.
On Insight. Yeah. Well, let's see how much time we have. We have about 10 minutes left, guys, and I don't think we ever actually got into what it was that Donald Trump wanted to do.
Oh, that's okay. Let's not talk about it.
You want to skip that one? All right, I'm fine with that. There is actually...
too much talk about him.
All right, well, how about this? We have 10 minutes left. Have you guys heard of Google's sponsored Lunar X Prize?
I haven't. Please tell us more.
It's actually coming up very soon. On March 31st, they're going to announce the winner. However, this competition has been ongoing since 2007. We're now down to 5 finalists, and the finalists are battling over, drum roll, $20 million. $20 million. That's actually a pretty significant prize. Now, the test is this, and this is what they're trying to do. The idea is they need to go to Mars, in order to win, that is to say, the competition. A team needs to land a spacecraft on the moon, move it at least 500 meters, and they have to send transmit a variety of data, including video. They need to have a panorama and an email and a text message from the moon.
Wow.
And that's it. And whoever performs the best wins the grand prize. And they've had since 2007 to get this done. Now
is Google going to install the cell phone towers?
I have honestly no idea how they're going to be doing that sort of specific stuff. But what I do know is that the 5 finalists are as follows: from Israel, which, by the way, is also going to be the first Israeli satellite to make it to the moon. So congratulations to them. Their team name is Space IL. The U.S. sponsored team is Moon Express. India is Timindus, excuse me. Japan is Hakuto. And then there's also an international team called Synergy Moon. Now, Synergy Moon is actually doing something pretty interesting. Instead of trying to propel themselves with some sort of rocket fuel or oxygen that 500 meters, they've decided to go ahead and try a hopping technique. Or, excuse me, not the international team. It was the Israeli team, Space IL. That's what it was. Okay. Excuse me, I apologize. So they're actually going to try and attempt a space hop, 500 meters. And I'm not exactly sure if they get more than one shot, but it sounds like, from what I can tell from the data I have available to me that they actually want to do it all in one fell swoop. So I think it's 1/6 gravity on the moon, so they're thinking it shouldn't be that difficult.
That's still going to be a pretty hard land. I mean, even at 1/6 the gravity, I'd imagine they'll get some pretty significant height, and just falling from that height, even at 1/6 the acceleration, they need some pretty good shock absorbers on that thing.
Yeah, the thing basically looks like a tiny box with giant legs on it, like these giant thin legs. Excuse me, they're really long thin legs, I should say. And I don't know. I haven't seen it in action. I'm willing to give them a benefit of the doubt. Obviously, they've made top 5 finalists. I can't remember. I should have wrote it down. I listened to that part. And I didn't see anything about it in an article that I had read. But
I mean, that's a really smart way to do it, because they're avoiding all kinds of obstacles on the ground. All the dust that you can, just dig your wheels into if you're not careful. All kinds of craters and all that stuff that could be around you, not knowing where you're going to land. And you can't fly, but you can jump. That's pretty smart.
And now, however, see, I'm wondering how this is going to work. Apparently, Synergy International is the only team that can actually get themselves to the moon. And that was supposed to be one of the prerequisites. So I'm thinking that likely means that they're going to win by default, but I'm also under the impression that these other modules are still going to the moon somehow. I just couldn't figure out exactly how or who's sponsoring that trip. Perhaps NASA themselves, I'm not entirely sure, or excuse me, Google, but I doubt it, because that's pretty salty to send anything to the moon, no less 5 probes. So
it is and it isn't. I mean, look at what Elon Musk is doing with SpaceX. He has decreased the price of launching rockets by significant percentage, considering he can now reuse the rocket. He's already has the successful landing after a satellite launch. Now, in order to go into moon orbit, land, all that, it's a hell of a lot more difficult. But it could be a little bit cheaper than it used to be.
Well, honestly, the whole reason why I even thought this was interesting enough to bring up in the first place is the fact that I think that it's wonderful that there are now corporations that even can afford to sponsor an event like this. Our technology has gotten to a point where it's officially cheap enough for us to do something like this. I mean, it was basically down to NASA for 40 plus years, 50 plus years to make it happen. And now NASA has to compete with SpaceX to get to Mars. SpaceX is trying to get to Mars by, I think, 2022 or something like that. And Trump just put an initiative to get it done by 2030, I think.
Yeah. One of the big contributions that NASA has done is just figure out a lot of the orbital mechanics, how to get a craft into orbit, how to land the craft, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, those mathematics, the formulas and all the calculations, they just didn't exist before the 60s. So now that all that stuff is in, you don't have to have that giant investment. All that stuff is public knowledge now. You don't need 1,000 scientists sitting in a room, calculating with basically something that's about as fast as an abacus. It is a lot easier to launch and be successful with those kind of missions, and there's a lot less risk involved.
Well, basically, this is the expansion of the market, and it's going to blossom from this point on. Really, it's just going to explode. It's going to erupt, and there's going to be some serious money in space travel.
Yeah.
Seriously. Now, I'm not going to suggest that anyone should listen to me for advice on anything financial ever. This is not me giving out advice. I'm just saying, this is my opinion. I really think that that's where the money's going to be at. And that's one of the reasons why I'm hopeful that we'll be able to actually get these images of exoplanets, like I had mentioned. In fact, I'll go so far as to suggest that within my son's lifetime, we'll have sent a probe to at least a neighboring star system.
I mean, if we can achieve, some fraction of light speed, the speeds that our craft travels at today is negligible compared to the speed of light. But if we can achieve even like 5 or 10% of light speed, um, we have other stars that are just like 4 or 5 light years away from us. So, suppose you're traveling at, 10% of the speed of light, um, at 4 light years, you can get there in 40 years. Now, I'm not taking into account relativistic effects and all that. The challenge would be to actually transmit any data back to Earth. Like that's going to be very difficult because of the distance. Um, and at that speed, you wouldn't have much time to take any kind of pictures or anything like that. I mean, you may have just mere minutes as you're passing by, uh, when those stars and planets are going to be in view good enough to where you could take a picture.
And I think that right there is the biggest hurdle. The fact that, let me put it this way. I think that until we develop an AI that is capable of operating independently in an entirely different star system, given a mission parameter, we're not going to be going to another star system. And I just don't think that we're too far off from that point. Like I said, within my son's lifetime before he's gone. So I'm guessing within 100 years.
It's possible.
Being extremely hopeful he was 100.
Yeah, it's possible they will be able to visit at least like Alpha Centauri or something like that within the next the next 100 years. Like that's definitely in the realm of possibility, and it's probably going to happen.
Yeah.
The problem is if any of those close stars are interesting to visit, because we know what's there.
Well, I wouldn't go so far. I wouldn't go that far. I mean, if anything, for curiosity's sake alone, if somebody's willing to spot the bill, I'm not suggesting that the government pay for something like that, but sure. I think eventually somebody will. In fact, I know that there are several projects underway at any given time or moment to go to Alpha Centauri, to send probes there. For example, I've heard of projects that range anywhere from sending a whole bunch of micro robots about the size of a stamp and sending them using a giant laser beam from Earth to propel them there. I've heard some crazy stuff like that, to sending a rocket ship that's fueled by atom bombs exploding behind it to propel it forward.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is, once you achieve the speed you need, there's nothing that's going to stop you in space. Like, there's just nothing there to stop you. So,
well, I don't know, man. If you're going like 150,000 miles per minute or whatever, it doesn't take much to ruin your day. I mean,
no, it
doesn't. Sand.
No, it doesn't.
That'll do it. But no, I think that we'll get there eventually. Alpha Centauri for sure. I think that Alpha Centauri would be like us going to the moon. I mean, it's there's nothing particularly useful at that time about going to the moon, aside from the advance in technology. But I mean, the moon itself didn't offer anything, is what I'm getting at. So I mean, we might not actually get anything from Alpha Centauri our first run around, but I still think that it's worth trying to get there as quickly as possible and as safely as possible.
Sure.
I know I kind of made it seem like I was dogging on those ideas, but these ideas that I had mentioned are feasible. They're actually feasible. They could really happen.
And here's one thing that shows that is we have Voyager 1 and 2 are currently the farthest man-made objects from Earth, and they have just exited into interstellar space, and they're still transmitting data back to Earth, and they were launched in the 70s. So we know we can have probes out there that survive for 40, 50 years. Now they're still in the vicinity of the solar system, but they're nuclear powered. They have nuclear reactors on board, and those are still going. So
I actually just saw a documentary about the Voyagers 1 and 2 the other day, and it's really interesting because I know what the Voyagers look like. Well, most of us do. And when I was growing up and I saw photos of these things, and even up until the moment I saw this documentary, really, I always thought it looked really MacGyver-y, if you will, like hodgepodge.
They kind of
They
do.
look like they
Kinda
threw
do,
it together in a hurry. But the documentary really highlighted the fact that that was the pinnacle of technological development. They milked the technology that they had for everything that they could get out of it.
Absolutely.
And the reason why, there's a very, very specific and good reason why it looks exactly the way it looks.
Yep.
And it's kind of like, let me put it this way. Have you guys heard of Johann Brahms? He's the composer who came up with the Hungarian dances. He also did the lullaby theme, right? The lullaby theme took him 8 years to develop. 8 years. The man was a perfectionist. He wanted to make sure that everything was exactly where it needed to be. Nothing more, nothing less. And that is the kind of precision that I'm talking about within the Voyagers 1 and 2. It is unbelievable how much thought and effort and efficiency and brilliance went into these projects. Like you had mentioned, they are 40 years and hundreds of millions of miles away and still working.
I believe it was the Voyagers that took the picture of the pale blue dot that Sagan used to talk about.
Yeah,
But,
I think so.
Guys, I think we're actually out of time.
Yeah, I believe you were correct. All right.
We should do this again. There's a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. Plus it's just fun to speculate. You know,
Oh, yeah.
I didn't want to not speculate on this. I wanted to keep this one fun and engaging and just kind of wander from time to time. That's what I was looking for on this one. So thank you guys. I had a lot of fun with this one. And thanks for hanging in there. We had some technical difficulties today, and we had to start quite a bit late. So again, I just want to thank you guys for hanging in there and working that out. And I want to thank all of you who listened to the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Thank you and good night.
That is all the time we have for you this week. This has been the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Be sure to check out FreeThought Fort Wayne on Facebook and on Meetup.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope your days are filled with logic, reasoning, and the eternal quest for knowledge.
Fun to speculate.
You are listening to 95.7 FM WELT Fort Wayne, radioactive. The opinions and views expressed in this show are those of the hosts and guests only. They do not represent those of FreeThought Fort Wayne, WELT, or any other organization. Welcome to the Hoosier Humanist Hour, where we explore science, religion, culture, ethics, and community from the humanist perspective. Join us as we discuss those topics and more, free from the ideologies of religion and superstition.
For millions of years, mankind lived just like the animals. Then something happened, which unleashed the power of our imagination. We learned to talk and we learned to listen. Speech has allowed the communication of ideas, enabled human beings to work together to build the impossible. Mankind's greatest achievements have come about by talking, and the greatest failures by not talking. It doesn't have to be like this. Our greatest hopes could become a reality in the future. With the technology at our disposal, the possibilities are unbound. All we need to do is make sure we keep on talking. On March 14th, 2018, mankind was left with much more than just the living memory of one of the most ingenious physicists to have ever wheeled across the earth. Stephen Hawking's impact and legacy will survive humanity itself. A pioneer in theoretical physics, Dr. Hawking's insights